It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
Welcome back to Declare Your Independence with me, Ernest Hancock. My special guest for this second hour, we have Robert Weil. Now, he is author of Red Cat, White Cat. Let's go ahead and pull that book up there. China and the Contradictions of Market Socialism. Market socialism. We're going to find out what that means. Can you have is it a free market, a socialism market, and what kind of market? Can you have a market and it not be free? I mean, these kind of things we need to talk about. Plus, we're going to be talking about China and India now with each other and, of course, with U.S. relations with China and India. Now, he's retired now, but he's doing a lot of writing focusing on India and the contrasts and similarities in the Chinese and Indian situations as relate to the world market. Now, I want to talk about your book, Robert Weil. Am I saying your last name right, Weil?
No, it's Weil.
Weil. Okay, Robert Weil. Now, Robert, let's go ahead and talk about your book, Red Cat, White Cat. What was the reason for you writing that, and what was it about?
I was in China in 1993-94, up in the northeast part of the country, teaching and then traveling down through a good part of the rest of China. And the book grew out of, first of all, years of following the Chinese Revolution and its twists and turns.
Okay, go ahead and give us the years, the revolution from.
Well, it started in the 20s, but the communists took power in 1949. So, I was a student of the entire period, and what we saw in 93-94 was the new, more capitalistic policies that had been initiated by Deng Xiaoping after Mao died in 1976. They were finally coming in full force up in the Northeast where we were. But what we were able to see was the sort of last of the old socialistic system that Mao had built up, being converted to this new, more capitalistic approach that Deng Xiaoping had taken.
Well, let's go ahead and stop.
And we saw that even more as we traveled then through the southern parts of the country.
Okay, let's go ahead and define that, because, more capital. I want to make sure that we get our terms understood here, so that we're not, not understanding each other. When you say a more capitalistic form, what does that mean? I mean, were they allowed private property rights? Was it really more of a fascist thing, or were they actually having courts protecting private property? I mean, what does that mean?
Okay. Well, it was a somewhat gradual process spread out over a couple of decades, really. Unlike, for instance, what happened in Russia after, the collapse of the Soviet Union, where within just 3 or 4 years you had a complete sort of overturn of the system. In China, what they began with was dismantling the rural communes that had been set up actually in the late 50s during the time of the Great Leap Forward. And these were very large-scale agricultural combines that not only were production units but provided schooling and health care and other services to the peasants, and where people did not farm their individual plots of land. What happened when they broke those up was that they reverted to a so-called family responsibility system where each household was assigned a portion of land to work individually and to market their crops, etc. So that was the beginning of the so-called reforms that Deng Xiaoping brought in. And then when they came to the cities, they began allowing small-scale private enterprise, sort of mom-and-pop stuff, but then began to dismantle the state-owned industries, which had been the sort of urban counterpart to the rural collectives. These were usually very large-scale industrial combines, in which the workers, again, not only had social services provided, but also their housing. And they began to either privatize those outright or, in many cases, kind of semi-privatize them, turning them into profit-making corporations controlled by party and state officials, by the managers, and then increasingly by outside investors as well.
Okay, now let me ask some questions here. Now, I really appreciate this history. This is really good stuff. Now, what happens is we look at, let's say, a Soviet-planned economy or a communist-planned way that China was doing it. Mm-hmm. They would have what we would learn in school in the 70s and 80s and such, a 5-year plan. How many albums of Bach are they going to get? How many gallons of vanilla ice cream is going to be made? I mean, it was just, excuse me. How many of whatever fill in the blank, they had to have it planned, and then they would gear up production to do whatever it was they were going to plan. Now, demand, was, I don't know, whatever somebody on top of the hill said there was going to be a demand for, and they would fill the supply. It's a very inefficient and weird way of doing it. Now, of course, their of the mind is that, but if you make a whole bunch of vanilla ice cream and you do it all at one time, and you can get a real good efficiency and cheap making of vanilla ice cream. It doesn't matter whether anybody wants it or not, but that's what you do. Then, well, let me go ahead and finish. So what they did is they go, all right, we're going to try and use individual incentives for people to have their own property in the rural areas, that they would be incentivized by being able to keep what's theirs, and they produce and they could sell in the market and everything. And all of a sudden, I would imagine there was an enormous increase in the production of food. You do the same thing with any kind of capital goods or commodities or, things of need, and, spatulas and frying pans and whatever in more urban areas, and that would happen also. But what they did is they started to replace this command economy. They would have different companies and corporations turned over to private, but of course, as with Russia, I'm sure, it was party officials that took over this kind of production. So this is my question. When you have a dispute on the property in the rural areas, or you have competition wants to come in and manufacture something in the urban areas, what is the role of the government? Is it to protect the individual that has, hey, man, this guy's encroaching on my property, or this guy, I want to compete and this guy won't let me? Is the government takes which side? You're not allowed to make the new better mousetrap because we already got a party official that owns a company that does it. I mean, so that's my next level. Once they start to go to this kind of private property and use of private capital, what is the role of the government in that system as they transition?
Well, you threw out a lot of stuff there. Let me try and address some of the issues, and I'll address that at the end. Your last question, okay? One, the kind of
we got to wait until after the break to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is good point where we can pick it up when we come back.
Okay.
Robert Weil is here talking about China. His personal experiences there, a long time study of it and living there, being exposed to it, wrote the book. red cat, white cat, China and the contradictions of market socialism, and what's going to be happening with the United States in relations with India and China and India. We'll be right back.
Uncovering the secrets and exposing the lies. That's what readers of freedomsphoenix.com get every day. Readers of freedomsphoenix.com are constantly provided the information that detail the real news between the lines of propaganda about government policies and the true relationship we all have with coercive governments. Learn the true condition of our economy, innovations and technological breakthroughs in energy, health, computer science, and space travel. Learn the truth well before it's admitted to in the lamestream media, the media that is so last century. Corporate media has evolved into nothing more than distributors of government propaganda, but we now have a fantastic alternative. FreedomsPhoenix.com provides constant news updates on the issues that affect our lives in the most important ways. Our liberty and our property are under constant attack, and FreedomsPhoenix.com provides the understanding behind the propaganda while encouraging the participation of our readers. Join us at FreedomsPhoenix.com. That's freedoms with an S, Phoenix.com. FreedomsPhoenix.com, where the revolution between the ears has already matured.